So up to this point, we've mainly been discussing when our outcome or y variable is numeric. Now we're going to move to a discussion about how do we deal with an outcome that is dichotomous or yes-no. Okay, so we're focusing on categorical outcomes and we're narrowing it down to just a yes-no outcome. So quite often in health research, we have outcome variables that are yes-no. The most common is to look at does someone have a disease or not. We can also look at during a surgery or some procedure, will someone experience complications, yes or no? Was a delivery vaginal or a cesarean? Did something work or not work? So these are success or failure type variables, a yes-no outcome. Now, we can approach the way we analyze this in a very similar way as we did for multiple linear regression, where the y or the outcome variable was numeric. Except we're going to have to make a few changes because our outcome variable here only takes on values of 0 or 1. And it's not a continuous number. So we'll look at how we make those changes, but kind of in the higher level, the big picture, there's not a big difference between linear regression and logistic regression, which is what we're building up to talking about. But before we get there, let's first just start with a simple case. We're going to begin by looking at relationship between two variables, both of them categorical, both of them yes-no type variables. Looking at, was someone exposed to a risk factor, yes or no? Did they develop some disease, yes or no? So we've already discussed the chi-square test of independence for data like this. And when we discussed that, we encountered one problem with that test, and it's that the chi-square test only tells us if we think the two variables are associated or not associated. It doesn't tell us anything about the nature of that association if there's one there. So it doesn't tell us anything about the direction of association or the strength. Well, first, the direction. Does being exposed increase your risk of disease or does it decrease your risk of disease? And if so, by how much? Okay, so we'd like something that can help us quantify the direction and the strength of the association. What we're going to do is we're going to build up to things. We're going to start small and build our way there. But first, we're going to look at some measures of the direction and strength of association. So the attributable risk, or sometimes what gets called the risk difference, as well as the relative risk, and then the odds ratio. So these are measures for quantifying the association between two categorical variables. So the data that we're going to work with comes from this Fiji fertility survey done back in 1975. Okay, and the data itself is, I guess, quite old and quite dated by now, but this data set has a few interesting patterns in it, and it's really good data to use for demonstrating some concepts. So that's why we're working with this data here. So the outcome variable there, the y variable, is looking at whether a woman is using contraceptives coded as yes or no. 1 for yes and 0 for no. And the variable of interest, which we label x1, is going to be the level of education, again coded as high or low. 1 for high education, 0 for low education. In this data set, we also have a few other variables. We have another variable, the categorized age, so put into age brackets of, I believe it's less than 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, and 40 plus. And we have another variable as well, an indicator of if they would like to have more children, yes or no. So later we're going to see that these variables, our question of interest is going to be what effect, if any, does education have on whether or not they're using contraceptives. And we can imagine that these variables, age as well as a desire for more children, are going to be confounders or likely confounders. Right? So for example, whether or not a woman would like to have more children, that is probably related with the outcome variable, right, using contraceptives or not. And the desire to have more children or not is quite likely associated with the level of education. Right? So a kind of general pattern is those with higher education tend to have fewer kids or smaller families. Okay, so we'll see that these two variables meet the criteria for being confounders, and we'll address those later. But first, what we want to do is just start in the simple case of one x variable, one y variable. So the relationship between whether education is high or low, and whether they're using or not using contraceptives. And we can see the 2x2 table displaying the relationship between those two variables right here. So looking at that 2x2 table, we could use the chi-square test to help us test, is there any association between level of education, and contraceptive use. If we carried out the chi-square test, we'd find that the test statistic was 0.6159 and the corresponding p-value was 0.4326 or 43%. Right, in this case, the p-value is quite large. We'd fail to reject our null hypothesis, and we'd end up concluding we don't have evidence to believe there is an association between these two variables. But we should note that there is a relationship between these two, and it's being masked or hidden by these other confounding variables. Okay, so we're gonna start to explore that as we work through this data set. So one important note, the chi-square test, or the attributable risk, the risk ratio, and the odds ratio, which we're going to start to talk about really soon. All of these assume that observations are independent, right? So woman number 1, her level of education, her use of contraceptives, and so on, does not depend on woman number 2 or woman number 3, and so on. Every individual is independent of the others. And this is quite often the case unless the data has been collected in certain ways. And we also assume that we have a large sample. Right, so if you remember, large sample size is an assumption of most of the tests we've encountered in this course and the previous course. And part of the assumptions that go particularly into the chi-square test is that each cell of the table has to have at least one person in it, and the expected cell counts are all 5 or more. Okay, so just a brief interlude for a minute, and this is going to help out with working through critiquing the paper on the final exam, if that's the option you choose. A reminder that this data set here we're looking at came from a cross-sectional study, right? So they surveyed these women. Let's suppose that instead the data was collected as follows. They got a few people to join the study, so they got a few women in the study, and then they asked them to invite friends. Okay, and there's usually some incentive for them if they bring people in the study. And then those people who come in invite their friends, and those people invite their friends, okay? And they continually invite more people to be in the study with some incentive program for people who bring new recruits into the study. So we want to think about what type of sampling method is this? Okay. Why might people use a design like this? And what are the implications of this design? So what does it mean for the assumptions necessary to do the chi-square test, or the attributable risk, the risk ratio, and the odds ratio, which we're going to discuss soon. So I'll give you a minute to think about that, or you can pause the video, think about what your answers would be to these questions, and I'll get to talking about them right now. Okay, so in terms of the sampling method, this is what gets called snowball sampling. You may or may not have heard of this method before, but you can imagine it works like a snowball rolling down the hill, right? You get a few people into the study, and then they invite more, and then those people invite more, and it slowly grows bigger and bigger, right? And so this is how you get your larger sample size. You start from a small number of people, and it snowballs into having a large number of people. Okay, so now let's think about why might you use such a study design. You can imagine in this context it's probably not necessary, right? If we just want to know, are women using contraceptives, what's their level of education, their age, and a few other questions, we can just administer a survey. We can find some way of recruiting people to be in our survey. We don't really need to do this snowball design. So when might we use such a design? Well, the answer there is generally for hard to reach populations. Okay, so if we just want to know about women and their contraceptive use and education levels and so on, it's not really hard to reach this population. But suppose instead we want to study something like injection drug use. It's going to be quite difficult for us to say, let's get a list of everyone who's an injection drug user, randomly select a bunch of names from that list, and then go and try and survey them or study them. The way that we might need to reach this population is we might need to go to, say, a safe injection site, okay, or shelters, somewhere where we can reach a few of these people, and then we can ask them to invite some of their friends, okay, with some incentives, and then those friends invite other friends, and so on. Okay, so it's a population that's hard to reach. And also you can imagine myself as a researcher, if I just went and asked people, hey, do you want to be in my study about injection drug use? They don't know me. They're not going to trust me, right? They're not going to want to join the study. If we go to, say, somewhere like a safe injection site where they might know some of the people who work there, they might be a bit more comfortable with them, and those people inviting them in, right, those people who work there, they may trust them more and they may be willing to join. And then friends of friends are willing to join because their friends are already there, and so on. So this design works for hard-to-reach populations. Okay, and again, as I mentioned, the paper that you have an option of critiquing involves snowball sampling. So you're going to want to think through some of these things. And then I guess one final note on this design: what implications does it have on the assumptions for the chi-square test or odds ratios and so on? Well, if you think about it, if one of the main assumptions of these methods of analysis is that observations or individuals are independent. Okay, now what do you think if someone's in the study and then they invite their friends in, who then invite their friends in? What do you think, how do you relate to your friends? You're probably very similar. You have similar likes and dislikes and similar habits and so on. Okay, so in this sort of a design, observations are not independent. People inviting their friends are more likely to be like they are. Okay, so with snowball sampling designs, there's a whole other set of methods that go along with these that can try and work with the fact that observations or individuals are not independent.
Stick around, guys. There's more to see, and please stay safe.